Today's project is a holiday project. We are putting together a reversible tree skirt. I like the idea of this project because it's always nice when you can use one thing for two different things or change up your decor really easily. So what you're gonna need, this entirely depends on your tree. The size of my tree, I have about a 3-foot tree that I have downstairs. Just as a fun thing during the holidays. Our big tree is upstairs, and in our basement we have a smaller tree. So I'm making a tree skirt for this smaller tree. So I have about a yard of my two main fabrics, my front and then my back. So it's reversible, so you want fabric for both of them that you'll like. And then I have about another half a yard of green, and this is what I'm going to use for my ruffle at the bottom. So first things first, we're going to lay out our fabric. So like I said, I have about a yard of both of these, give or take. And what I'm doing is I've folded it in half, hot dog style, and then I'm folding in half hamburger style, if you will. So I've done that with both of these. First thing you'll need is your tape measure. Then you'll need your pins. So grab your pin cushion. You're going to put your tape measure in the corner where all the folds are and pin it down. And then you can use your tape measure to measure all the way around. Now I usually will start on the shorter side. So this is the short side, this is the long side. And I want to get as much material or as much curve out of this as I can. So this one is at about 16 inches. So I'm going to put a pin there. And then 16. And as I go around that curve, I put a pin in the curve. And that helps me to see exactly how much fabric I'm dealing with. So I'm just going to measure again. Yep, looks good. So it's kind of hard to see, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pins that makes that curve. So this is a 16 inches for my curve. Now, if you want, you can take a fabric marking pen and just kind of connect those curves or those pins, but that's not necessary. So now you're going to take your scissors, and I start on the outside of my pin. That one's kind of in the way. And I cut from pin to pin. And as you see, because I'm using carpet, I can kind of pull the fabric up as I go. There we go. How nice is that? Pull out all those pins. And you can see, oh, my pin's in the way so you can't see, but it will line up really nicely here once I pull this pin out. Just like that. See? Very nice. So that's how you're going to cut out your skirt piece. So you can kind of see there, it's folded in quarters, folded in half, and then up here, it's all the way. We have our circles cut out for our tree skirt. Our front side and our back side, again, it's reversible, so I'm going to be able to turn it right side. Now we're going to cut out the top. Now remember, this is a full circle. So we don't want a giant circle, and we are going to cut up one of the sides so that you can fit it around your tree. But your tree base some of those tree bases are really big and some of them are really skinny. So that may determine how big of a opening that you want to do specifically for your little tree skirt. But you don't want to go too big, or else you're just going to have this giant hole and you're going to be really frustrated. But you want a big enough opening that you can get it on your tree if you have cords or wires that go underneath the skirt, that kind of thing. So I just have this tops for some moose munch. It actually got some art by my kid, holds a lot of my pins. And so what I'm going to do is I like about this size of a hole. I think this is probably plenty for what we're doing. So if I cut this kind of in fourths, that's what I'm putting on the edge here. So I just have my little pin and I'm just going to draw along the edge there like that. And that's going to get me about the size of the opening that I want for this particular project. And again, you can go more or less depending on the tree stand that you're using. If you're using a live tree, some of those tree stands are really high, so you may need a bigger hole and then a lot more fabric to cover up the base of your tree. All right, so we have our opening, we have our curved edge. Now we're going to talk about the ruffle on the bottom. We've cut out our top and our back, or front and back, I guess, of our tree skirt. So now we're going to cut the ruffle, and that's going to go around the base. And for the ruffle, I'm just using this plain green material. It's just easier to see. So, and then it's easier to match with both of them. So this side, I just liked bringing out that green. And then this side, I just like the contrast. Now it's going to be reversible, so whatever you use for this portion, you want to make sure will work for both sides of your material. Now for the tree skirt that I'm making, my ruffles are going to be about 3 inches. So about this wide at the bottom. But because it's reversible, I'm going to make them double that size, plus I'm going to add a seam allowance. So in this instance, I'm going to make my ruffles 6.5 inches long. And I'm just using, this is probably about 1/2 yard of green material. And so I'm just going to use all that. Now this ruler, I have word state, is 6 inches wide. So all I'm going to do is move this up that extra 1/2 inch for my seam allowances and cutting across. So here I have 6.5 inches. Now, if you are going to be doing a bigger tree skirt, then you probably will want your ruffle to be a little bit wider, because when I fold this in half so that it's reversible, this is as wide as the ruffle's going to be. So if you have a big tree skirt, you might want that entire ruffle to be 6 inches. So you may need to cut a 12-inch piece, more like this, a 12-inch piece for the ruffle. Does that make sense? I know, maybe that's a little confusing, but you'll see as we start sewing how that's going to work out. All right, so I have 3 ruffle pieces here that we're going to stitch all together. And then I have my front and my back. And then the other thing that you'll need is some type of closure for the opening that you're going to make. So in this case, I just got some white ribbon. It's not the best matching. I'd rather maybe do a green or a red, but I don't have any on hand, so we're going to use this white. And sure, I could probably use the leftover of this and make ties or something, but we're going to use this ribbon. All right, let's get sewing. The first thing that we're going to do with this project is we're going to sew our ruffles together. And it's actually very easy. So I have 3 of these. And I'm just going to put the 2 selvage sides together, put on my machine, get my foot in place here, and stitch them together. So there's my seam. And then we'll just come add this guy in. Now the amount that you're going to need for the ruffle will probably depend a lot on the circumference of your circle. If you have a really big circle, you're going to need a lot more material for your ruffle, because as it ruffles, it will become smaller and smaller. So I probably have, I would say from selvage to selvage, my guess is I probably have about 120 inches right here. That's just a guess. But that's kind of where we're at. Now the next step to sewing the ruffle is to find the end, and you're going to stitch your ruffle. Here's the wrong side of my material because that's where my seam is. So I'm going to put wrong sides together like this. And I'm going to stitch the ruffle. So I'm going to change my stitch length all the way to a 4. So I want the biggest stitch length that I have. And I'm just keeping it on a straight stitch. Now some people have a ruffling foot for their sewing machine. That's awesome. I do not. I have a very basic machine, and that's fine. This will work. So long stitch length on a straight stitch. I'm just going to go forward. I am not back stitching, just going forward. And I left my ties at the end really long. I'm going to go forward, sewing at 1/4 of an inch, so my material is right at the edge of my foot. And I'm just going to sew all the way to that first seam. So here's that first seam. I'm going to stitch to that first seam. I'm going to lift my needle and my presser foot, and I'm going to pull and cut those ties long. So this entire first section will all ruffle together. Then I'm going to start, same thing to do the ruffle, but I'm starting in this new section. Now why am I doing this? Because ruffles don't always keep their shape, and when you're trying to pull the ruffles, sometimes having too long of ties just is a nightmare. So doing those ruffles in sections really helps you out. Second seam. So now that center section has a straight stitch. We call that a basting stitch. And now we're doing the next section. thread's really long. Now normally when I do a gathering stitch like this, I will do 2 sections of stitches, but because of the nature of this project and the amount of fabric I have to work with here, I'm not going to do that second row of basting stitches. That just really gives you really, really, really like perfect ruffles. I'm okay if they're not perfect. And we're going to kind of move our machine so I can kind of show you how to do these ruffles. So here's our first section. So here's our seam. Separate my ruffle stitches. So here's our seam, and then here's our end. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pull either the top or the bottom thread, not both, just one, and start gathering our material towards the center of this section. Now, the reason that I do it the way I do is because now I can come over here and gather from this side, and I don't have this whole long piece that I have to get gathers on. I just have this smaller section that I'm gathering, and we're just moving those gathers all the way to the center. So it does take a little bit of time. If you have a gathering foot, this is a lot easier for you because it gathers as you go, but a lot of us don't. And that's okay. This, you can still gather and have really nice looking gathers. You just have to put in a little bit more effort. We're almost there. Getting all these. Now the amount of gathering that you have really depends on how much you want to gather. So let's just kind of put this down so you can kind of see. So you can see this section isn't as gathered, and that makes a difference here. These sections are more gathered, so you have more material. Really, gathering is up to you. If you don't want a lot of gathers, then don't gather as much. If you want a ton of gathers, then gather a lot. But remember, the amount of gathering you do will need more fabric. So if you want real tight gathers, then you're going to need more fabric for around the base of your skirt. I'm just going to keep gathering. I'm going to do my next 2 sections, and then we will show you how we attach it to our tree skirt. We have our ruffles all gathered up. Now we're going to attach them to our tree skirt. So to do that, first thing we need to do is open up both our tree skirts. So we have them both here. And we're going to pick one of the sides, and we're going to slice through that side. So we're separating this side from this side. And we're going to do the same thing with the opposite side. So this is going to be where our opening is for us to put it on the tree skirt. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the right sides of our tree skirt front and our tree skirt back together like this. We're going to open it up. Like that. We're kind of matching our openings, matching our center, and then we'll just put a couple pins just so it stays in place in these 2 spots. Kind of see that. Now we're going to do our ruffle. Now the ruffle starts on one end and ends on the opposite end. The ruffle is going to be sandwiched between these 2 layers when we're sewing, and we're going to match the raw edges. So that means the raw edge of the ruffle here to the raw edge of both of these. So to do that, we're just going to match up the edges like this and pin it in place, just like that. Now, as we go and we start putting the ruffle in between, you can kind of even out the ruffles so that when it gets sandwiched, you know you have it. As I'm going around the circle, I'm just redistributing my ruffles just to ensure I have enough ruffle to get around my entire tree skirt. And that's just fine. Again, if you want a lot of ruffles, then you'll want a little bit more material for your skirt at the bottom for those ruffles. So I did 3 6.5-inch sections for my ruffles that were about 40 to 42 inches wide. I think the material I had was probably 40 inches wide, because a lot of times a lot of the less expensive plain fabrics are only about 40 inches wide instead of the 42. All right, I'm going to keep going around and sandwiching this ruffle in here, and then we'll come back together and you'll see what it looks like and we can sew it up. Got all my pins in, so you can kind of see here I've got the top, in between is sandwiched the ruffle, and then my base. And then I have these long strings, and that's okay. These are the strings from the gathers, and we're just going to leave them there until we actually sew on our machine. So we have all of the skirt ready. Now there's one more thing that we're going to go ahead and do, and that is we're going to put our ribbon pieces in place so we can stitch those as well. So I have cut 2 pieces of ribbon here. Both of them are 40 inches long, okay? And I'm going to cut them in half one more time so that they're each 20 inches. And how did I decide on that? I tied a bow and decided that I liked that length. So when we get done here and we tie the bow and you're like, oh, it has too long of ends, then you most definitely can change it. All right, so we're going to put our ribbon in. So that we need to take our pins out of our side here. And we're going to sandwich our ribbon in between our 2 layers. Okay, but we're going to use a tape measure to make sure that we go down the right amount of length. So the first one I think I'm going to put at about 3 inches. So I'll center it at the 3-inch mark. So I guess really it starts at the 2.5 inch. So right there. And it's going to go inside. We're going to tuck it inside. Just like that. Make sure it's out of the way, so we don't want to accidentally sew on it. And then the second one, let's go down, let's put it at about the 4.5 inch. So we're centering it at 5 inches. So we're going to put it right about there. And tuck it in. Okay, and then I'll move that pin there. And now we're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So we're going to come down, what did we say? Centered at 3, so almost exactly where that pin is at. We're going to put the ribbon in here, tuck tuck it inside. And pin it. And then from there we went down and centered it at the 5 inches. Let's make sure. Oh. 5 inches, perfect. You don't want them to be all wonky. That's the worst when you sew something on and the opposite side, they're not right next to each other like they're supposed to, like on a zipper or a button, and that gets very frustrating. So measuring on this is an important part. Okay, so our 2 ribbons are inside, and then we have our ruffle on the inside as well. So now we're going to sew it, and it's going to be kind of weird. We are going to sew it so that we have an opening right here in between these 2 pieces of ribbon. So we're going to stitch around, all the way around, up, all the way around here, and then to our ribbon and stop. So we only have, what is this, maybe 3 inches? Oh, almost 4 inches opening, but that's all right. But we need an opening so we can turn it right side out and finish it off. Now, if you don't want to do this and you would much rather put like bias tape or something, you could definitely put, leave this section open here and turn it right side out, and then put a piece of bias tape here to finish it off. But we're just going to encase the whole thing. And it's actually very simple to do. And I'll show you how. So if you've been around for a while, you know I like to use 2 pins to signify where I stop and start if I'm leaving an opening. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to change my machine back to my regular stitch length. I'm still on a straight stitch. This time, okay, once I get to the corner, I put my needle down, I turn, and now I'm going to sew all my ruffles, sandwich them in to my layers. All right, we're at the other corner. We've sewn all the way around. Needle down, turn. Now we're going to stitch up this side with the ribbon. When I get to my ribbon, I back stitch and then just keep going. And that's just going to help that ribbon stay in place and give it just a little bit more strength. Okay, I'm at the top. Needle down, turn. Now I'm going to go around the top edge. Just easing around that curve. Okay, we're to the other side. Needle down, turn. Here's my 2 pins. We're going to stitch to those. Move this guy out of the way so we can see. And there it is, all stitched together. Now we're going to take our scissors and clip diagonally in our corners. We're going to clip around this curved edge about every 2 to 3 inches, just to help it lay flat when we turn it right side out. We're going to clip and trim any of our threads, including our long gathering threads. Want to get rid of those. So any long threads, see all these bad boys? Some more right here. Let's get rid of all those long threads that we can find. Just clean it up. Looks nice and clean. Now we get to turn it. So we're going to open here, stick our hand through, find our ribbons on the opposite side, and use them to pull through to the other side. Take a little bit because we're turning everything. Just work everything out slow. Don't go too fast because you might rip your fabric at your opening. Once you get to the other side, turn, and then use those ribbons to help you pull everything through. Oh my goodness, so cute. This side. Oh, I love it. My goodness, it turned out great. And then use the edge of a pencil or pen, and you can kind of walk those corners out so that they're nice and sharp. So they look really good. There we go. You can tie your ribbon. Like I said, so this one is 20 inches on each side. And I just liked how long those ties were, but that might drive you nuts, so you might want to trim those down to maybe 16 inches on each side. It's kind of up to you. But doesn't that look great? Now the last thing that we have to do is just close up the opening. And I'm actually just gonna cheat and do it on my machine. Just start at one ribbon and end at the other. Just make sure your raw edges are tucked inside. Trim those threads. And you definitely want to make sure you trim these ones good, because you don't want them hanging out for everyone to see. There we go. And there you have it. It needs a good press and maybe a little bit more shaping at the top here. Oh, see, look at that. I knew there was more. There we go. That seems a little bit more normal. And then we tie these guys. Now the best part about this project, let me tie these and then I'll show you, is it's reversible. So if next year you decide you want to change things up, all you have to do is turn it around and tie your ribbons to the other side. I wonder if we can just pull them through. Look at that, we just kind of pulled them through this side. And now you have a reversible table skirt. And because we folded those gathers at the beginning, we folded that fabric before we gathered it, there's no raw edge at the bottom. So don't have a seam. So on either side you have a beautiful looking ruffle. And that is how you sew a reversible tree skirt. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or concerns. But make sure to check out the link in the description so you can go over and get the photo step-by-step tutorial. And we will see you guys next time.